We have been looking at Barry Stroud's description of what philosophy is, and so far it's a very interesting paper. And so far, what we have gathered, um, in fact, I actually read this paper 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, and at the time I read it for some specific purpose, so I didn't notice these things. But now I've read it again, and one of the good things about this paper is that it's very frank, and also it seems to me that the lack of self awareness is really astounding. I don't think a much a smarter philosopher would have said these things so bluntly. Um, Anyway, so far what we have gathered is that philosophy for him, um, don't think he has defined it yet, but he's going to soon. Philosophy for him is a form of reflection and self-reflection. Um, but he says that it's a unique form of self-reflection. It's not any form of self-reflection. So a lot of things which happen in especially less advanced countries in the name of philosophy, might not consider them philosophy for reasons he will tell us soon. Even he criticizes a lot of mainstream philosophy being done in the so-called advanced countries like America, etc. So it's not as if he is only criticizing philosophy in in the so-called repressive regimes. So first thing he has told us is that philosophy is a type of self-reflection, but not any type of self-reflection, or not any type of reflection. It's a unique type of reflection about which he will tell us more. But before he tells us that, he tells us something very interesting. One is that for philosophy to emerge as a discipline supported by the society as a whole. So it's not talking about individual persons doing philosophy here and there. It requires particular social conditions. And there are two main things he has said in that regard, and both are interesting. The first thing is that society must be pretty advanced. And by advanced, I think he means materially. So, there must be a lot of money to go around to have, time for leisurely activities like philosophy, and also resources for society to support these philosophers. And in America and in the rest of the so-called advanced world as well, advanced capitalism, philosophers are highly paid academics, even though especially outside America, there has been a lot of defunding of philosophy departments. Well, in America, I think, I don't know right now, but I had looked a few years ago, and philosophers are generally some of the highest paid academics. So they live in, generally. So society has to be very advanced. So it can fund these people, and they can, do this reflection or self-reflection for its own sake without any fear. So that's one thing he said. And the second thing is society must be benign as well, at least for certain sector of society. So he's by benign he means society should have certain freedom, tolerance, so people can say things which society might not like. So philosophy, in his sense, cannot, generally speaking, cannot prosper in a repressive regime, or repressive society, or an authoritarian society, or probably not even in a very conservative society in his sense. Although he is, I guess, honest enough to say that he's not assuming that society is benign and materially advanced for everybody in that society. What it needs is for a certain sector of society. So, for example, in America, there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of repression towards certain sector of population. Not just today, but it has been going on for a couple of centuries now. So that is compatible with certain other groups to which, Barry Stroud belongs. He's actually a Canadian, but he has, I think, worked his whole life in America and basically studied in America as well. I think he died 2 years ago. So these two conditions should be met. One is society should be materially advanced, so you need a lot of money for philosophy, and also it should be benign, so there should be a lot of freedom and a lot of tolerance towards these philosophers. And he's assuming that these philosophers are funded by society, and they mainly work in university, as he will tell us. So that's what we did last time. And so here he said society must be not only fairly advanced, but fairly comfortable with itself. Like it's a society which is well established. So there is a power balance, I guess. There's not much fear of the poverty, and not much fear of the outside enemy being able to occupy that society. So it's a very powerful society. So it's basically extrapolating from what exists where he's doing philosophy. So his actual conditions are sort of he's projecting those as the ideal condition for philosophy to a certain extent. So it's not just so society must be fairly advanced and fairly comfortable and fairly dominant, not just in terms of power, but also in terms of power of its ideas and its culture, to provide an official place for the best the philosophy can offer. And then he goes on to say that university has not been with us as long as philosophy has, but the age of royal or aristocratic patronage is behind us. Much work now being done in philosophy is supported by forms of social patronage other than the university. Much work now being done in philosophy supported by forms of social patronage. Resources that, I think there must be some typos there. Resources that could obviously put to pressing social uses sometimes go to philosophers. This is one mark of the advanced state, even the civility of our Western culture. I'm going to use Western culture because now he is using it, but it's just amazing. So he thinks that I don't know whether he means that, but it's mark of the advanced state of Western culture that resources can be diverted from pressing social uses to supporting philosophy and philosophers. Um, and civility, I don't know. I mean, I personally think that the sort of money Western societies have, they can support social needs as well as philosophy. But if you believe that pressing social uses sometimes go to philosophers, for example, not providing, not you know, for example, not providing clean water to people in Flint, where contaminated lead, contaminated water is killing kids even today. How can that be part of civility? I don't understand that. But anyway, what is his point? His point is that society feels the need to support philosophy even when it has to make some sort of sacrifice. Um, um, but then, there have been a lot of defunding of philosophy in other Western countries, and in some Western countries. So that must be the sign of growing uncivility. I don't know. This strikes me as both a good and a bad thing. It is bad because the university becomes increasingly professionalized. It has increasingly professionalized society. So university has been professionalized. Why? Because it's being supported by society. I don't know how you can draw a conclusion from there. I think one of the reason philosophy has professionalized because it's in university. Then university, within university, so philosophy is mainly done in university. He's saying, and since things which are uh, done in university, they become professionalized because it is a specific institution dedicated to that studies, and so it is bound to evolve particular methods and things. But I think the reason why philosophy has become professionalized to a certain extent, or pretend to be professionalized, yeah, because a lot of philosophy, written philosophy is just very bad philosophy. I mean, technical philosophy. A lot of good philosophy as well. But what I mean is, I think it has become professionalized not because of the university, but because of the dominance of sciences. So all subjects, even literature, try to sort of adopt scientific posture because science has become the model. I think that's the reason. But anyway, so this strikes me as both a good and a bad thing. It is bad because as the university becomes increasingly professionalized, it has increasingly professionalized philosophy. So it has become a profession rather than a search for truth as such. I guess that's what he means. This, in my opinion, has rendered much more of philosophy sterile, empty, and boring. So the professionalization of philosophy has turned philosophy into sterile, more technical, empty, and boring. Um, at least Barry Stroud is not boring. I have to say that. I've read some of his other stuff too. It's not boring. Like he has written a book on Hume, and I remember reading at least one article by him on Kant's transcendental argument, Kant's transcendental argument, or transcendental argument as such. And I think he has done a lot of work on skepticism. Anyway, so what institutions demand from individual institutions get. So, and what universities, even the best university now, demand from individual professor on the whole is quantity of publication. That's true. So and so people just adapt to that. So they write something and then they recycle it in various forms. So there's a lot of garbage in that sense, and I think the administrators of universities are responsible for that. So frequency of citation in the professional literature, widely certified distinction in the profession, and other quantifiable measures of an impressive resume. Yeah, so you get jobs nowadays or promotion based on how many people have quoted you. Yeah, so that's a disastrous first. I mean, sort of, but still a lot of good philosophy is done in philosophy departments. And that's what professors of philosophy are on the whole providing, to the detriment of philosophy as I see it. So it's a professional philosophy which, according to my classification, was what I call positive philosophy. And that's broadly of two types: conceptual analysis, and secondly, just, any other subject, talking about the world, the society, but at more abstract level. So he doesn't like that sort of philosophy too much. And he thinks that philosophy for him, so that's here he can say, so this the philosophy is done sort of. I don't think he is rejecting that philosophy, but that's not what the distinguishing or distinctive feature of philosophy is. For philosophy, him, as I've been sort of alluding to as well, is what I describe as a negative sense of philosophy. Of philosophy is a critique, criticism, questioning of received opinions, etc. And this, he think, the university also provides the freedom to think. So he has criticized philosophy, but the connection between philosophy and university is a good thing too. And why? It provides a place which philosophy can be done, and with wise leadership can be done in conditions in which it can thrive. It requires teaching, the need to say clear things in public, and to make them accessible to others and subject to critical assessment. And teaching is what passes on the subject to new generation or the tradition, if only in the form in which it is received by those now entering into it. The university also provides the freedom to think about something for a long time, like freedom in the sense that it pays you to think, so you are free to think. And society is benign, so it's not sort of policing your thought. And in new ways that might show no beneficial social effects. So in university, you can do thinking for thinking's sake. At least that's the ideal type of university. And that's true. Philosophical works, even work that seems to go nowhere, is officially supported by the university. And that's not just true for philosophy. A lot of work in physics and sciences goes nowhere. I mean, if people were judging, people do a lot of work, and some of work actually finds application and all that. A lot of work done in sciences and philosophy doesn't have any obvious application. So philosophical work is officially supported by the university, and so by the society at large, and not for any of the specific conclusion it is expected to reach. It is regarded as more important that the activity should go on than it should have this or that specified outcomes. And that sort of thing can prosper only when society is pretty materially advanced. Otherwise, society won't spend that much money. Results in the form of conclusion reached or propositions established are not what matters. So one of the things he I think, and he thinks that this is a good thing, and one of the things which is part of negative conception of philosophy is that negative conception of philosophy is not aimed at reaching any specific conclusion. And even the conclusions you reach are not according to negative conception of philosophy, which I described in the first video. So conclusion as such are not important. It's how you reach those conclusions, so your reasoning. And it's important that you question your conclusion as well. So the actual questioning and reflection and self-reflection, that is important. And I think his ultimate conception of philosophy, so which he is, coming closer now, it will at least, will have this part where, results are not important. So this is a good thing, as he said, as I see it, because I don't regard philosophy as a set of results or doctrines. So philosophy doesn't have any specific doctrines, and even if philosophers have doctrine, those doctrines are not important, because those doctrines could be, rejected once they find that the reasons are piling against them. So results or doctrines, philosophy in this second sense is not results or doctrines focused. In a sense, no science is, or no discipline is, but philosophy more than that, because it's a specific discipline which focuses on the nature of reasoning and argument and criticism or critique or self-doubt, as Kant and Descartes showed us. So I don't regard philosophy as a set of rules, results, or doctrine in the sense of conclusions reached or propositions established. So even, for example, if a philosopher believes in a god or a philosopher doesn't believe in a god, for a true philosopher, for Barry Stroud, it doesn't matter really. What matters is that he or she is open to argument, so force of the argument and force of the reason. And you can't develop that openness unless you give conclusions your secondary place, or even third or fourth place in your priorities. But as a matter of fact, most of philosophers are very much attached to their results and doctrines. So in that sense, this sort of conception of philosophy seems to me very idealistic. And there are certain people like Barry Stroud who seem to enjoy that, and I myself enjoy it, but Barry Stroud doesn't see the limitation of that conception of philosophy, to which I will come. It may well be that every society or culture needs ideas or beliefs or doctrines to give sense and direction to the lives of its members. So he's not denying that. And accepting a belief or doctrine or espousing an ideology or philosophy is a form of thought, of thinking. But it is not the kind of thought that philosophy is. The philosophy is not the doctrine. So what's worthwhile in Aristotle is not his actual doctrine, because a lot of them are proven to be false today, but his philosophy still has relevance. Similarly, Plato or any other philosopher. Or rather, but it's not the kind of thought that philosophy is, or rather that kind of thought is compatible with the absence of philosophy, of what is valuable about philosophy at its best. So philosophy as a technical subject, philosophy as a subject which establishes certain results or doctrines, doesn't matter which type of doctrine they are. That sort of philosophy can exist in a lot of culture, he thinks. But the sort of philosophy which is pure openness, pure freedom, and reflection based on that sort of freedom, that is the specific treasure of type of advanced societies in which Barry Stroud lives or used to live. So now he's contrasting it with religion. And in the first video in this series which I made, not about Barry Stroud, but what is philosophy, I contrasted how philosophy has this specific relation with religion, which it cannot really forget, because it came out of a civilization where religion was the heart of things. And it's haunted by religion in a sense, even when religion as a civilization is long dead in those so-called advanced societies. But then bastardized forms of religion are used as sort of a tool, in a sense, knowingly or unknowingly, to actually keep that contrast with philosophy wants to keep. So that's why he goes back to religion now. Religion too is a form of thinking, and certainly about matters of great concern to human beings. But I think religious belief or religious thought is not the same as philosophy or philosophical thought. So it doesn't matter that Saint Augustine or Saint Aquinas were great philosophers, or many other medieval philosophers, or you go outside Christianity, Ghazali. I'm sure Ghazali was a better philosopher than Barry Stroud, but he thinks that he wasn't a philosopher. And why he wasn't a philosopher? Because he believed in religious doctrines, and he wasn't open enough. But if you read, Ghazali's book, for example, Al-Munqiz min al-Dalal, for example, you will find that sort of openness, but that is not enough for Barry Stroud's idealistic conception. So as I put it a moment ago, it is compatible with the absence of philosophy, so religion, even though it includes beliefs, attitude, and precepts that are based on general ideas about human beings and the world. So philosophy, which is done in Christian seminaries, or used to be done and it's even done today in Islamic seminary. Seminary is a bad word for Islamic institution, because but if you look at sort of curriculum, religious, students go through, probably most of it is actually a-religious or non-religious, because they spend a lot of time on language, grammar, rhetoric, a lot of time on logic, a lot of time on other discipline, which like reasoning discipline, like usul fiqh, which is a specific principle of jurisprudence. It's another type of logic, and then they actually study philosophy. Like those philosophies are Aristotelian and Neoplatonic, but they're still philosophy. But for Barry Stroud, that's not philosophy in his sense, because such thoughts and beliefs express a conception of the world or creed, but philosophy, as I see it, is not a creed. Even though they have creed, but philosophy itself is not a creed. Philosophers have creed because they don't treat their creed as final, I guess. But I guess no one should, but somehow philosophy is special in a sense in which hopefully he will tell us. Nor is it the effort to discover or produce a creed. So philosophy in that sense is a negative thing in his sense. So it's not a creed. It's not an effort to produce a creed or ideology. It's just questioning anything. But my question is, how can you really question in the same way the institutions and ideas of your own society? In a way, you question, ideas of past civilization or other societies which you don't belong to. So society how critical you are, you are still the child of your time, still the product of your society. So how can you have that absolute freedom or absolute? And the other thing is the nature of human any human activity, that once we once we focus on one thing, we are bound to neglect other aspects. So how can so it's actually a really wild thing, but a lot of people believe, and it's not just about philosophy. I think people have similar sort of ideas about the nature of freedom, for example, in Western societies or in capitalist society, in modern society. And the similar question which I raised can be raised about them. Anyway, I think the attitudes or motives out of which philosophy is pursued is not the same as a typically religious attitude or orientation. So the difference of attitude. So it's saying it's contrasting with religion. So religion and philosophy don't differ in necessarily in ideology or doctrines, creed. What he thinks is they differ in attitude. And by attitude, I mean what I just said. He seems to mean pure openness. Openness. Openness, I don't know whether it's right or not. Pure openness in the sense that you are detached from all possible ideas, whether you reject them or espouse them, all possible institutions, etc. In a way in which the only intrinsic thing for you is your ability to reject something and espouse alternative ideas, or even if not espouse, actually to consider. So that pure openness makes sure that you are not married to anything, really, whether it's philosophy, whether it's religion, whether it's science, whether it's own society. And that's what he's saying. But I think that's just impossible. A person I mean, this is a good ideal. So you can read some of the openness is a good thing. Freedom is a good thing. But unless we realize the limitations of openness and freedom, we'll be in a big delusion, and that delusion is part of this conception of philosophy. And I think that is delusion is reinforced because it's sort of a justification for your personal superiority over other people, and also your society's superiority over other societies. So, wow. So I think I have to stop here, and I still probably will need another one, maybe two, to cover the whole thing. But I think that was good. I was able to think through some of the things which I wasn't that clear about at the start. So, okay, thank you.